Welcome back to a Purring Wolverine. Today, we are going to discuss happiness, or more specifically, the illusion of happiness. This is not to say that you can't be happy. What we are going to be talking about today is why chasing happiness as a life goal is a fool's errand. For the purposes of this video, we are going to be defining happiness as a sense of joy or cheer, an emotional state that would induce smiling, maybe even laughter. I have seen recently that some definitions of happiness include to feel content, and that's good for mental health. In fact, that's part of the point of this video. However, the common conception of happiness does not include simply being content. Happiness is an emotional state that is necessarily transient. When we talk about the chemical or neurotransmitter basis of an emotional state, specifically happiness, we can identify 3 neurotransmitters responsible for generating that feeling. Serotonin, oftentimes referred to as the happy hormone, regulates your mood. It regulates your digestion, your sleep cycle, your circadian rhythm. It's fundamental to your baseline mood. Serotonin is mostly produced in your gut, which is an interesting throwaway fact. But serotonin combines with 2 other hormones or neurotransmitters: oxytocin, which is known as the love or the cuddle hormone. Oxytocin is considered the key to human bonding, being responsible for the creation of trust, building relationships. Studies right now are starting to indicate that romance itself is sparked by a flood of oxytocin. The birthing person, when they are giving birth, their body is flooded with oxytocin as part of that process. You also get a little shot of oxytocin whenever you give someone a hug. And finally, what you might expect to see on the happiness neurotransmitters, dopamine. Dopamine is the motivation and reward molecule. It pushes you to accomplish a task and then rewards you with that feeling of happiness once you have accomplished it. Dopamine is also involved in your fine motor control and your decision making and impulse control, which is why we tend to be a little bit more reckless when we are in a good mood. When we consider the fact that we can so easily name these neurotransmitters, and we can so easily put a label on something that is necessarily going to be temporary in our biology, it is easy to understand why happiness is, in fact, not a good life goal. I would like to underscore that being happy is a good thing. Quite obviously, everybody enjoys being happy by its very nature. It's good to strive to be happy. It's good to plan moments or times of happiness. The goal of this meditation is to assert that happiness is not a good default state to strive for. When you wake up in the morning, eat your breakfast, have lunch midday, driving home from work. Happy is not a state you can experience over long, extended periods of time by its nature. And so expecting to do so is almost guaranteed to lead to your own suffering, if you will. Happiness is something that everybody feels differently, but it is important to recognize that it's not going to be a permanent state for anyone. We all know someone who just seems to be happy all the time. Obviously, seems to be and reality are two different things. But even those folks who have captured that would tell you that to experience happiness as a default emotional state is impossible. Many folks believe that if they were able to achieve a specific thing or acquire a specific good, then their happiness would be increased, or their life would become better, because their default happiness would increase. And certainly getting that new job or car or toy, etc., will almost certainly make you happy for a time. And looking forward to that happiness is a good thing. However, expecting a new job to bring you a permanent state of happiness will fail. And unfortunately, when these expectations of a more permanent state of happiness fail, it can drive us away from even a baseline contentedness with our lives. We can feel jaded or disgruntled, removed and disassociated from our own lives. Obviously not something that breeds long-term mental health and success. So, if happiness as a default state is impossible and not realistic, what is the goal? Obviously, as we've alluded to in this video, the goal is to be content, or contented acceptance of where one is at this moment. Now, before you jump on me here, I do not mean acceptance or contentedness to mean complacence. Those are very different things. Complacence is, at least if we're going to be picky with definitions for the sense of this video, not acceptance. It is rather giving up. Contented acceptance is understanding that where you are currently is okay. You can certainly strive to get better, either personally or professionally. You can push for a better environment for you, your loved ones, and those around you. Being content does not necessarily mean accepting the troubles or the woes that you currently face. It simply means that you understand that where you are in life's journey right now is okay. Being content and accepting who you are requires a fair amount of self-reflection, requires a fair amount of work, if we're being honest, because many people do not really know themselves. And that is the first tenet, so to speak, of really accepting where you are and being content in your life, is knowing yourself. You may feel momentary times of melancholy. You may regularly suffer from depression. You may rarely feel touched by anything below a content mood. In many cases, all of these folks may still not truly know themselves. Getting to know oneself means oftentimes taking the time to examine your own emotions and reactions to the environment around you. For example, if you are feeling unwell, be it depressed or simply off, how has your day gone? Have you eaten enough food? Have you had enough water? Have you been outside? Have you interacted with friends recently? Not all of these things may be applicable to you, and of course there are many other facets which it takes to examine oneself. But asking these types of questions can begin to give you an understanding of yourself. The same types of questions should be asked when you feel happy and when you feel a sense of peace. How has your day gone? What have you eaten? What did you do this morning? Were you taking care of yourself? Were you taking care of others? Were you being productive and getting work done? Examine your day. Think critically about the actions that you have taken and how they might be affecting you long term, as small pieces of stress and happiness can accumulate to affect our overall mood without us even being cognizant of the fact. Another thing that you can examine is, what are your life habits? What are things that you do sort of unconsciously, or things that may happen to you with a surprising regularity? Are you staying up late on your phone, snacking early in the day or late at night, playing games when you should be working when you should be playing games, ordering food throughout the week rather than preparing yourself a meal? Whether these life habits are positive or negative is largely irrelevant for the acceptance piece of where we are. You can decide you want to change them later. Recognizing what they are is the most important first step to getting to know yourself. The next step, after you know yourself, or perhaps while you are doing the work to know yourself, is to make sure that you are aligned with yourself. This might seem like a natural flow from one to the other, but once you know yourself, your life habits, and the things that trigger your content, happy, and depression in states, it's much easier to decide which of these things are aligned with who you want to be and how you want to behave. If you decide you want to change a life habit, it's important going into it to understand that this is not an easy task. Changing any piece of yourself is not easy. Changing a piece that has been unconsciously written into your habitual state, very difficult indeed. So it is important to recognize that it is okay to have work to do. We all have work to do on ourselves. Recognizing the work and understanding that it is work is an important step and cannot be overlooked when one is trying to find a sense of contented acceptance. The next thing I want you to remember is to not let comparisons drag you down. I will not say, do not compare yourself. This is a very common tactic for self-improvement techniques, or even the angry partner telling you to get over some woe that triggered emotional state that you are feeling. Comparisons are natural. Comparisons are inevitable. The goal is to not let those comparisons drag you into a mental state of self-doubt and blame. There will always be someone in a worse position, and always someone in a better position. There will always be someone who could have handled it worse or handled it better, no matter what we're talking about. Those things, while they can provide a helpful reference point if you feel too lost one direction or the other, positively or negatively, rarely serve beyond that reflection, and can often serve to detract from your overall sense of contentedness and peace. When you find yourself compared or comparing yourself to other people, remind yourself that this is a false narrative driven by lack of context. We don't know the intimate details of another person's life and thoughts. Even our closest friends and our partner, we will never truly know their brain and their inner workings. So to attempt to compare yourself to any of them is simply unfair. And the further you are removed from the individual, the further you are removed from context. You don't know their upbringing, financial status, day-to-day mental well-being. Many things play into everyone's actions. Nothing is simple. To compare yourself to someone as a direct one-to-one comparison does yourself the disservice of ignoring your own context. So please, understand that comparisons are natural and they will happen, especially if you have a half-decent relationship with your parents. But try not to let these comparisons become expectations. One thing that I would suggest you do throughout this entire process is meditate. Now, I understand meditation for many people is a scary thought, but you do not have to be a Buddhist monk isolated in a world of peaceful tranquility and transcendence to meditate. You simply need to take some time to yourself. You could do a body scan. Close your eyes. Slowly bring your focus and attention to your scalp and hairline, and bring it down slowly as if you are quite literally scanning your body. Simply focus on your physical feeling at that moment, not necessarily trying to change it, not trying to tense or loosen anything. Simply identifying what you are feeling in each part of your body as you scan it down. Taking this time to focus in on the physical self is a good way to root ones to the present moment, which is ultimately a good tool for meditation. You can do counted breathing. Every inhale is a 1, and every exhale is a 2. Would be 1, 2. Do this to 10, and on 10, with the exhale, restart at 1 on the inhale. It is here that I will mention being distracted is part of meditation. While you are body scanning, you may get distracted around the navel, and your mind may start bringing up the woes of the day. This is how meditation works. When you become aware that you have left your task, simply return to it. Occasionally I find on my breath counts that I am breathing 13, 14 because I have been distracted. I am counting on autopilot, but my brain has left the present moment. When I find that I have come back, you reset to 1, 2, no problem. The next meditation you would run through could be focusing on the noises around you. Remain as silent as possible and try to stretch your awareness of the sounds you're hearing out. Sometimes this can lead to a profound understanding of the silence that you are surrounded by, but often you'll find that you can hear a great many noises that our brain pushes to the periphery normally. This is also an excellent tool to root you in the present moment. Remember, letting your mind wander during these meditation times can be just as helpful as bringing it into ordered thought. Some days you will find meditation techniques to be almost impossible to get through, and some days you'll find that they glide by without too much difficulty at all. If you're looking for guided meditations, I might suggest the Headspace app. I might also suggest searching ASMR meditations, as there are many good ones. Ultimately, the goal with meditation is to set time aside for your brain. It does not matter if it's busy. It does not matter if it is tranquil. It does not matter really if there is a sense of peace achieved, or if you do really any of these techniques I have suggested. You could simply sit for 10 minutes and let your mind wander without constraint. That is a perfectly acceptable form of meditation. The power of meditation comes from that time and from that unrestrained mental activity and present focus in conjunction with each other. This will sort of reset your background processes, if you will. It gives you an opportunity to subconsciously return to a baseline state throughout the week's agitations. I would suggest, again, to everyone, spend some time meditating. Even only 10 to 15 minutes a day is oftentimes enough to achieve a greater sense of peace and contentedness. Finally, I want to talk about your emotional capacity for giving, or as we'll call it, fuck bucks. Everyone has an emotional bank account, and everything requires you to give a fuck about it in order to have any sort of interplay with it. Whether it be attention from a friend, a coworker, an email, your pet, needing to feed yourself, dealing with a frustrating neighbor. Any of these things require a bit of your fuck bucks. Keeping this in mind, it is important to recognize that all people, and you are not an exception, have a limited bank account. You cannot spend fuck bucks everywhere, and you cannot give a fuck about everything. Do your emotional budget. If you can't give a fuck about something, don't give a fuck about it. Give yourself permission to move the fuck on. There are other things to spend your dollars on. This is a bit flippant in its verbiage, but is an important concept. You are not emotionally endless. You are not a Scrooge McDuck of emotional resilience. At some point, you need to cut off yourself, your friends, your peers, the world around you at large, and stop giving a fuck. You can tell them you have run out of emotional capacity for the day. You need to self-regulate. You can tell them whatever you want. But you need to stop giving a fuck about the things that cost too much. Wrapping these things together, your emotional bank, avoiding letting comparisons drag you down, aligning yourself with yourself, all built upon the foundation of taking the time to know yourself, should bring you closer to that sense of contented acceptance, to that understanding that where you are right now isn't where you always have to be. You can stay here if you want, or you continue to move forward if you want as well. But ultimately, where you are right now is okay. You are doing a good job. You have done enough to deserve love. You are worthy of praise. You deserve everything good because you have done the work to deserve it, even if that work is starting to recognize you have work to do. Be proud of yourself, accept yourself, and if we're lucky at all, we can find a sense of peace and contentedness when we are not happy. I appreciate you spending your time with me today. Obviously, I welcome any questions, concerns, comments, feedback. Please leave them below. And once again, I thank you for joining us here on Purring Wolverine. Good night.